So where are you?
I am at home in Edinburgh, just having a cup of tea, warming up because somehow it got down to -3 again.
Wow, right. So the false spring occurred.
Yeah, every year, to be perfectly honest, like people wander around going, "Oh, I can't believe it. Oh, it's so chilly," and you're like, "Really? Come on." It's kind of always like this. We get that snap. You get lambing season. Everyone hopes there's no lambing rain, and then they hope they don't get this freeze snap. And yeah, so I think we've got a week of it.
Right. Okay. And then are you working so you're working at the minute, right? You're on a job, is that right?
I just finished last. I've had a week off now, so I just did an 8 week shoot, or in fact, was it 8 weeks? Setting up for a shoot on an Amazon Prime drama, and I was actually the forklift driver for the carpentry department.
Right. How's that? Interesting?
Ah, brilliant! You know what? After so much time fiddling about on our own, it was really great to see a bunch of mates and just do something completely different again. Like get back to the old, like hitting stuff and lifting stuff. It was brilliant. I did not have a bad day.
Yeah, I saw some friends on Saturday in London. It's the first time I've been in London for definitely for over a year. And took the van up, went and saw some friends for a barbie in their garden, stayed in the van, and it was really great. Like we were like, my wife afterwards was like, "Yeah, that's feels like that's the most relaxed I've been in months, really." Just to actually do something quite normal, like hang out in a garden with some mates. Yeah, it's really really nice, especially with the weather coming back as well.
Oh yeah, we've been some great weather, and same with on that job. We had everything from -14 outside, to -4 in the workshop, to like sunbathing at lunch, and there was just 16 kind of pals really. Our friend Gav's the head of department, and it was all mates of Gav's, and it was just a total pleasure to hang out with a bunch of carpenters who are generally pretty chilled folk anyway.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, you were saying when we chatted on the phone that you like the carpentry chat, you like the on job chat.
Oh yeah, like the banter, I guess, as it gets cold in Scotland. I think after doing 12 years in the event industry, doing lighting, sound, rigging, projection, kind of everything really, the biggest part of that for me was just the pals and the crews that we worked with. I was never really that great a technician, but I managed to blether my way into jobs.
Yeah, it's a good lot of camaraderie in those environments.
Yeah, you have to. You're doing ridiculous hours and you're on the road for months sometimes and minimal sleep, and you just kind of cut through all the BS and just kind of get on with it. So yeah, there's lifelong friends that I've made round the world with having done that kind of job for 10, 12 years.
And are you based in Edinburgh? Is that 'cause for some reason I didn't realize you were based in Edinburgh, but you move around a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah. I am based in Edinburgh. This is probably the first time I've been in the same place for this length of time in 21 years. So I do live and base here, but pretty much work wherever and whenever. And then when I'm not working, I'm generally in the back of the van chasing surf or bumbling around with a camera, hanging out.
So how do you define what you do? That's the classic question, isn't it? What do you tell your mum?
Oh my word. Yeah.
Don't think my mum's still worked out what I do.
No, I think my parents are constantly surprised that, it's me and my sister are very similar like that. She lives over in New Zealand, I'm here, but we both had really bizarre trajectories. At the moment, I'm a photographer and filmmaker if I was to put myself in a pigeonhole, but, you know, I've got no problem with doing 8 weeks driving a forklift. It actually made me even hungrier and have even more focus as to what I wanted to do afterwards. I wasn't itching to finish the job. Actually, I was incredibly sad. So yeah, I just jack of all, motor mouth with a camera at the moment. That's about it.
So you've always balanced. You never like had a grand plan. It's always just been projects that you're passionate about, jobs that come along. Because obviously you've had some. I mean, we met when you were doing a Patagonia job, didn't like? When was that? Like 3 years ago. So, our paths have crossed like a fair amount. We've got loads of mates in common, like blah blah blah, all that stuff. It's all like such a small little world we occupy, isn't it? Um, but yeah, like, so you've always just been pretty happy to sort of chase those opportunities as they came along.
Yeah, I think the way my life has panned out, and more recently, I'm realizing that that's due to my dyslexia and the way that my brain works and what I need to do to be captivated, interested, motivated. I do need variety. And probably this photography film element has been really regimented, and I've really been kind of pushing that and working on that. And I think I lost sight of how important it was for me to do other stuff and to not worry about the fact that some people might think that means you're not a proper photographer or a proper filmmaker. I think I get so much from that balance. And yeah, my brain prefers that. I'm laser focused for a while, and then I'm kind of trimming along and I go, ooh, pretty light. Let's try that.
Can we talk about your dyslexia since you brought it up? Because obviously that's something you're really vocal about, like, and not vocal is probably the wrong word, but it's something that you're very open about. Let's put it that way. As you should be. Like, why wouldn't you be? But my wife's actually dyslexic as well. It's been really fascinating. She was diagnosed quite late in life, which I think is quite common for our generation, isn't it? I think these days, I don't have kids, so it's not something I'm particularly familiar with. But my understanding is that these days they can spot it quite early, and that they're much more able to sort of provide kids with a relevant learning environment to accommodate that. Whereas from speaking to my wife and just anecdotally from what I know from other people our age that have been diagnosed with dyslexia, that obviously wasn't really a thing for us. And it's like well told stuff, but there was certainly. Just going to use my wife as an example because it's the person I know about. Like, certainly in her case, the classic thing, she was kind of like led to believe she was basically stupid, like she couldn't learn in the right way. And that, like, that shaped her whole life. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, she I would say she's 42. I would say she's only really in the last 5 years actually understood, like, what she needs to do creatively and in terms of work to feel. Happy is even understating it, just to sort of like get through life in a way, really. So I guess that's a very long preamble to ask, like, how is that for you? Is that something that you were aware of from a young age? Has it shaped the way that your life as like, obviously you work very visually. You even when we communicate, you're quite you're quite open. You're like, I'm going to do voice messages because it's easier for me. You really own it, basically. So how's that? Was that like an early thing, or is that, like, I'm talking about with my wife, been like quite a late realization for you?
So my dyslexia was picked up by my mum actually when I was in primary four. She just kind of knew something was up. Like, as a kid, I was quite almost tormented, actually, would be the best way to put it. My mum said, by the whole school experience. The first place I was at, she literally had to tear me out of the car every single morning to put me there, kicking and screaming and crying. And it just broke her heart. And she thought, there's something up. And very early on, she pushed and pushed and pushed, and they said nothing. No, no, no. He's just slow. He's just stupid. And that has stayed with me, my whole life. And then we managed to get out of that school, and there started to be this light. But for me, it was, I forgot. And she told me the other day, again, she said, you forget this every single time, is that for like 3 years, you'd go to bed, we'd hear this thud upstairs, we'd hear a scream, and we'd come up and you'd be having night terrors and you'd be soaked in sweat just at the thought of having to walk through those doors and sit in this room with all these words and numbers flying about, with everyone getting it and me just sitting there going, what the fuck's going on? And so it was pretty brutal. And I was really lucky that they picked it up. But it stuck with me the whole of my life. From a very young age, someone, and I wish I could remember who it was, turned around to me and said, look, Mike, you need to think of your dyslexia as a superpower. And it was an older dyslexic. That's all I can remember. And he just said, just think of it as a superpower. You can see things in 3D. And I just thought, "All right, okay." And it's taken me a long time. In fact, until Friday, or no, was it Friday we were going to talk? Thursday, I got interviewed for a dyslexic podcast randomly, and this guy also made me realize I know nothing about my dyslexia, and actually, there's so much more to it, and it has completely shaped my whole life. But what has been super helpful is when I did, as you said, start to own it, I put something at the bottom of my email saying, this was sent with a smattering of dyslexia. Please excuse any errors. I tell people, look, I'll try voice dictate, but I'm probably going to send voice messages. You don't have to send one, you can type back. So, yeah, I mean, literally this weekend, I'm kind of glad we didn't talk on Friday because I've had kind of 3 or 4 days to really kind of think about it a lot.
When I think back to my school, I'm a little bit older than you maybe. I'm like 44, 45 in 2 months, which is vaguely terrifying.
Hey.
But I think, I was like a super bookish kid. Like I just whatever the opposite of dyslexia is, I think I probably had. Like, I just had a real affinity with reading and the written word and that means of processing information, which is obviously what it is. And I think when I look back, and obviously I got treated like really differently in school because of that. Like I was kind of earmarked as like a bright kid, and because I suited that system of learning, and yeah, like was sort of told from an early age, yeah, you'll do quite well. You could probably go to university if you want, and was kind of like almost given special treatment really by teachers. And when I look back, there was definitely kids that I think, yeah, they just must have been dyslexic. Like they're just, that just wasn't being picked up. And it's such a it's heartbreaking really, isn't it? Because it's such a lottery, like, and it does really affect like the way that your life turns out. And the other thing is as well, like one thing I've learned from my wife is it's not just a question of not being able to interpret information that way. It's actually like neurologically very challenging, isn't it? It's very tiring. It's very emotionally difficult at times. It's not just like the physical thing. It's actually everything that comes with it that's really difficult. And it doesn't, again, I think it's different for younger kids now, but doesn't really come with a huge amount of support. Like, what you're describing is the fact that your mum picked it up and then you've essentially had to negotiate these challenges yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, people can help you, people can notice it, but like you say, it's so much more nuanced than just reading and writing. And sometimes I have focused too much on that. And what I learned last week again was this affects the way I deal with work, with emotion, with relationships, all of that stuff. It's to have a dyslexic brain, depending where you're at how what speed you function. Like my brain works at a ridiculous rate at points. Some people might not think that and just think there's a lot of air in between this hair, which there is. But like for me to be able to like download all the information, that's the hardest bit because I think in a 3D space. So kind of like I joke and call it my matrix, and there's a lot of stuff spinning around there, but it allows me to pull things in. But trying to then put that down into a kind of linear 1D space, like you'll see beside me here, there's like a big whiteboard there, and then there's like another one here. You know, I'm forever having to offload these things. Otherwise, it kind of gets to a breaking point. And for me, that breaking point is kind of like not a meltdown, but it's just an overload. I get anxious. I get stressed. I completely drop the ball on things. And people ultimately can probably think that I'm really flaky, but it's not that I'm flaky. It's just that I've moved past that. Like I'm going 100 miles an hour. So something that's really helped recently is I've actually managed to find an assistant that I can work with on an hourly rate. She's a pal of mine. She's someone that's family, which is important to me. I trust her with everything. She's got every login, Millie, to my whole life. But as we start to work together and I start to throw things, I'm literally like throwing things at a wall at her. That's why I joke. But she collates it and puts it into places. And then once or twice a week, she distills down like, hey, have you replied to this person, have you done that, have you thought about that, you know? And that is relieving so much stress.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I was going to say as well is I don't know if ableist is the right word, but society is so not used to even like on the micro level, like helping people that have a condition like dyslexia deal with that issue. Like let's take the voice memo example, like as a really trivial example. Like I actually hate receiving voice memos, like, but that's like a really dickish thing on my part. Like, so I never listen to my answer phone messages, which I'm like totally notorious for amongst all my friends. Like, and I honestly just, I don't know what it is. It's like if I see him, I'm like, oh god, I can't listen to that. Like, yeah, it's just one of those weird things. And when people started sending me like voice memos on WhatsApp and that, I almost like made it like a bit of a dick. Like I don't fucking listen to these. Like I don't even listen to my answer phone messages. I actually sent that to a couple of people. Like, and obviously I didn't mean anything by that. Like I was just being a bit of a bellend, really. Like thinking I was being funny more than anything. But then when you messaged me, I thought, what shit? Like I'm not even thinking about that. I'm not even thinking about the fact that actually somebody that might just be a way of somebody making their life easier, like, and I'm just like completely, even on that tiny level, like, it seems trivial, but I guess like that's the sort of, really it should just be, yeah, whatever, who gives a of course I listen to that, like it's not a big deal, but it's not even on people's radar that there might be a reason for it at all. And again, that's something I've really noticed with my wife that she finds really tiring. It's almost like not only does she have this thing to deal with, but she also has to do a lot of thinking for other people as well, for whom it's just not on their radar at all. Like in situations like that, and then obviously on way bigger, more emotionally stressful situations, as you've just alluded to, like work and relationships, and like that's just like one thing, isn't it? So how do you does it I'm guessing that can be mentally, like, extremely challenging to constantly be having to negotiate this type of thing.
Yeah, I think what again, something with all this time that I've kind of been afforded and everything that's happened, I've kind of also realized that I need to meet people like with it as well. That some people really, really hate a voice message. And actually, I didn't realize there was a voice dictate button until recently. And it's freaking amazing. So I'll do voice messages, but then actually sometimes I'm like, oh, I know that they can't listen to this at the moment because they're in bed, probably with their partner. The partner's not awake, so they won't be able to listen to that. So I learned to bend on that. And I think I also learned to think about you never know what someone is either going through or has gone through in their life. And kind of societally, I don't think we have that compassion anymore, or not anymore. With social media, everyone's just out there poking and jabbing and maybe not thinking about what's going on behind the doors. And I think even going back to what you talked about earlier at school, you were told you're smart, you're going to go far. They're preconditioning you to that. And then all the other people around you. So no wonder we live in a really dog eat dog world of capitalism when everyone's either told they're going to be a dummy or like you're going to make it, right? Go and like just, go and run for the hills there, squash everyone below you. Yeah, I mean, we could go quite.
Well, it's such a theme of the podcast, though, like, the episode isn't, when we're talking, it's not out yet, but it will be out by the time people hear this, with Andrew Alexander King. And, and one of the themes we talked about in that is, like, how do you break out of the mold that is set for you when you're young? Like, I mean, that's what this whole debate about race diversity is actually about, really, isn't it? Like, how can and why it's so insulting when people claim that those structures and, you know um institutional kind of structures don't exist. That's why it's such a load of bullshit, because clearly they exist for everybody. And, like, this is kind of what we're talking about, isn't it? Like, how do you it's such a theme, like, and I think it's one of the reasons people really enjoy the episodes that I call like lifer episodes, because really they're about how people have broken out of the mold that they, the path that they were on. And that's kind of when you talk about like education in this way, and like, and the things that you get told you should be doing as a kid, and like that's kind of another factor of this, isn't it? Another kind of strand of this. It's like, because yeah, like in my case it's all very like very polite and nice, but even so, I remember, I've talked about this before, but I remember when I met Ed Leigh, we were really young. Like, I think I met Ed when I was like 17. He's like just fucking young idiots, you know what I mean? And I, or maybe a bit older. Actually, no, it's a bit older. But we were about 20. Thinking back, it's a good, definite sign I'm getting old, isn't it? Like getting those kind of details confused. Anyway, like, but he'd not been to university, and I'd been to university, and because I'd kind of been told that's what I was going to do my whole life. That's just what I was going to, like, I didn't really question it. I wanted to go as well. Like, and I remember meeting Ed, and he was like, "Yeah, I didn't do that. I just went traveling. I thought that was a waste of time." And I remember being like, "Wow, you can do that," like, which is crazy, isn't it? Like, because I'd done a lot of traveling at that point. But it was just so far out of my kind of life experience at that point. And I was really like struck by that. I was really like, just even on that level, the fact that he could just make a decision that had taken him off his preordained path was an impressive thing. And it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. But when you've got the added, you know, confines of these sort of preconceived ideas people have about you because of a condition like dyslexia, it's even harder, isn't it? You know,
Uh, Absolutely. And I think what's quite interesting about that was like, I didn't even have the chance to go to uni in that sense that I managed to get a B. No, I always say a B. It was actually a C in computing. And the only reason I got that was the teacher, Dave Wheel, who's still someone I know, he's still a pal, saw something in me, saw the way I was being treated by the head of department, and thought, you know what? No, I'm going to help you out. He tutored me on a Sunday and he waved the carrot of, I'm going to teach you how to lead climb, traditional trad style, if you apply yourself. And I was really into the climb. He took the climbing after club and I was really into it. And I thought, oh my God, like what an opportunity. And that person, along with a number of other people in my life, just kind of believed in me, which gave me
yeah,
this opportunity to get there. And to go back to the Ed thing is actually quite amusing. I can't remember where I met him and Christian, and it was back when I used to do stuff for Red Bull with a bunch of the guys. And I remember meeting that pair, and we're like, "Oh my God, like this is hilarious!" Like,
yeah, with
the
these fuckwits.
yeah, these maniacs make a living out of this. And I remember just going, wow, like there's a few people that I've met at that time. And it was only recently when Ed moved to New Zealand and my sister lives there, they've ended up working together, it's a small bubble. And she was like, oh yeah, this guy arrived, a ball of energy. What's he calls himself? The Ron Burgundy of the snow or something. I've been hearing
I'm
that.
not sure. I'm not sure he calls himself that, but I've definitely heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that to Ed when he moved to Wanaka. It's quite funny. I'm sure he won't mind me telling this story, and this is not a podcast about Ed, but it is quite funny. He was quite nervous when he moved to New Zealand. He was a bit like, it was the only time in my life I've ever seen Ed have a crisis of confidence. It was quite weird, and he was staying here at my place, him and his family, and he was really like, yeah. I was like, wow, this is mad. I've never seen you not have confidence. And I said to him, like, fucking hell, you'll be running that town in, in like in a year. Like, what you on about? Like, don't worry about that, you know. But and so it turned out he ended up doing quite well.
Yeah, and there's an amazing pool of creatives, organizers. There's so much going on there. Like the level of photography and film work that comes out of Wanaka
Yeah,
with the companies,
amazing.
like Jace Hancock's,
Tracks talent, doesn't it? That place.
yeah, Two Bearded Men, Tim and Toby, my pal Ross. It's mental, but people make a conscious decision, like my sister did like 20 years ago, and just went, I want to be here. And this is not going to be easy because it is not an easy place or cheap place to try and carve a living. And everyone just did whatever it took to carve a little chunk out. And when I transitioned from doing the kind of event world and lighting and sound and all that. My sister just said, "Look, do you want to come over? Let's see if we can get you a job waxing skis in Racer's Edge, the shop there." That's what everyone does. All her pals have done that. It's part of the way in, as it were. And I waxed skis in the evening, skied during the day, and fell in love with photography again and film, and kind of with a really great friend of Joe's, a guy called Ross, who I still speak to on a weekly basis. Some days it'll be daily, and it was just this thing where I went to this little bubble, as people call it, with a bunch of really, really passionate people, and it kind of put a rocket in my ass.
Well, again, that those inspirations that we're talking about are also very, very important, aren't they? If you're going to try and find your path. So that teacher, right, that you mentioned when you were a kid, that kind of obviously saw something in you and like encouraged you in that way. Was that your first introduction to the world of like loosely termed the outdoors, like climbing, etc. Or did you grow up surfing?
No, I've actually only surfed for 10 years, and skiing was like a massive thing. So, you know, we raced as kids, and we'd batter up north and go and literally, ski down 25-degree or ice, Scottish sort of style. Me and my sister, I think, even shared a cat suit, so we had to get changed in the middle of a hoolie, passing this thing
Wow,
over.
that's pretty Scottish. Scottish
Yeah,
ski racing.
yeah, exactly. And then, up in Edinburgh, so we were at the dry slope at the Dendex dry
Hill
slope.
end, yeah.
Yeah, Hill End. And, there's that whole small world of like, Scott McMorris and all that, and Elliot Neve. It was this little bubble of Scottish snow, whether you were a snowboarder or a skier. And actually skiing and snow was the kind of thing that we did for years. And I kind of fell out of it. Maybe when I finished school, started traveling, went to, not didn't go to uni, and then found this thing again. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've been missing this. So snow has been, and the mountains have been a massive thing for me for my whole life until the addiction, the heroin of all sports, surfing took over.
Right. Yeah. So is that quite late then for you to get into surfing?
Yeah,
So how'd that come about? I mean, same with me, to be honest. I was 20 when I first surfed. It's like the last one that I got into.
y-
So how did were you just up north and sort of gave it a go, or what was the way in?
it was funny actually. It was stuff working for Red Bull, and there's just this job came in. They're like, right, tow a generator up to Thurso. It's like, Thurso? What the hell are we going to do up there? Like, World Surf League, QS, blah, blah, blah. Didn't even understand what was being said. I was like, cool, sounds good. Take a box of cables, head up. And it was the Cold Water Classic. So, you've got the likes of John John and Sonny Garcia, and all these names, which I didn't have a Scooby who they were. Maybe I knew who Kelly Slater was. Pretty sure he wasn't there. And it was kind of this eye opener of, all right then, that was quite a good wave. And I'd played around before, I'd had a wee try, but, it wasn't really into it. And I think I did that event for like 4 or 5 years. And during that transition of kind of seeing that, I was still doing a lot of winters out in Engelberg in Switzerland. So I'd work the summer, and then,
Oh, I love Engelberg.
yeah, it's a great little town. And I'd work my ass off. And I bumped into it years ago, that place. And I just sort of wanted to find a place that there was no Scottish or English people. And I just wanted to go and hide. And I thought, well, Switzerland, that'll work. And found that little place. And I would just go back and forth from summer and winter. And that took me all over the place, all of the Alps with work. But I had a couple accidents, got in a couple slides, and also lost a couple friends in different accidents, not related to me being there. And this kind of whole shift was like, wow, what am I doing? I'm finding myself all winter just pushing the limit. And then on the drive home, stop off in Chamonix. And, now when I look back at it, I feel like go and try and kill myself before I go home. And I just felt like I needed to slow down. I loved it, but the addiction felt so strong that I didn't want to end up as one of those friends.
Was that like ignorance though, or because when I look back, like I like absolutely cringe when I think back to what we got up to on our early seasons. Like, I mean, there were certainly people that knew better than my group of friends did. And I wouldn't say we were like massively reckless, but there was definitely some. I think just generally there wasn't the culture of awareness around mountain safety that there is now. Let's put it that way. And Engelberg's like a proper fucking full on ski town. I mean, the terrain is like genuinely quite scary, a lot of it, and like really, really like easy to get to as well, isn't it? You can get yourself in trouble up there like pretty fucking easily for sure.
Yeah, I would like to say that it wasn't willful, but actually on my first winter in Canada, I actually went to Nelson in BC, little place, little backwater, and it was kind of an inspiration through my sister, through a friend of hers. And the first thing I did actually, and I think it was kind of under her instruction a bit because she'd had a pretty interesting baptism of fire in Chamonix where she started doing winters and said, "Look, go do an Avi course." And so I did this Avi course with this amazing guy, Tim Ripple, and had this real awareness. So when I came to do my first winter in Europe, I had just done a level one. So, again, nothing. But I'd scratched the surface of it. And I guess the thing with Engelberg was it was pretty bizarre because on any given winter, you'd get all sorts of characters turn up, like the whole TGR crew would turn up. So one day you've got, Jamie Pierre and Shane McConkey and all these crews were coming really early on before it was really that well known. And you're out buzzing around with all these people. And I'm no pro athlete, but that is who you end up hanging out with. And that's who you end up skiing with. And you just kind of follow along with that. So it was kind of weird. Like, I think some of the biggest incidents or accidents I've been close to are actually with professional athletes, if I'm honest. Like, because they are in that top 1%, that could potentially outrun an avalanche.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Well, I guess your risk, like your acceptance of risk, changes, doesn't it? Necessarily,
Yeah.
because you're putting yourself in that position where you've got to like earn a living in those environments. Really. Yeah. Yeah. I did a trip to Engelberg. I was lucky enough to write a book. It was a while ago now. It was about 15 years ago. It was like a snowboard guidebook, and I did a 3-week trip around Switzerland, like research researching that. And we stayed in Engelberg, stayed in that really posh hotel in the corner, like the old faded sort of Victorian hotel, whatever that's called. Like it's called something like the Grand Hotel or
Oh, the
something.
Hotel Europe or something, isn't it?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Stayed in there. Um, and I just remember it really clear because we went out in that like uh, Mexican bar, like the cantina place, like
The
in
Yucatan.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's loads of American soldiers and airmen in there because there's some air base that they were all coming down from to go skiing. Super young boys ended up getting pissed with these young, like I think they were just out of like training school or whatever, all like 17, 18 from like Tennessee and Arkansas. And one of them said to me, "Where'd you learn to speak English?" Uh, we were like, we were like, he's got to be joking. And we're like, well, I'm English. And he's like, yeah, I know, but where'd you learn to speak English? Like, actually thought American. I mean, yeah. And he was about to go off to Iraq to, yeah, like, wow, okay,
It,
that's your peacekeeping force.
yeah, it's interesting because so the reason I ended up in Engelberg was a friend of mine, Chris, from school, managed to get a job at Zurich Uni. He's a tropical tree ecologist. I'd done my winter in Canada, and I said, "Look, I'm going to go do one in Europe." And he was like, "Oh, do one near me, then I can come and crash on your floor," because it's an exorbitantly expensive country, especially if you're like a junior scientist. He's living in flipping Zurich. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours on the train. And so I emailed everyone in town, every hotel, kind of saying, "Geez, a job." And the only person that sort of amused anything was this woman at the Schweizerhof, the hotel which is just beside where you stayed. She said, "Yep, come and have a chat." So I turned up, drove my car out, didn't know where I was going to stay, found a place at the youth hostel, went and met her, and the chef. Chef could hardly speak any English, and he just slapped me on the back and said, "Scotty whiskey," and put his thumbs up. And I was like, "Oh
Yeah,
Jesus,
you're in.
I'm in. There we go. I've got the Scottish card. Quality." And this obsession for God knows how many years, 10 years kind of started. And it was just, eat, sleep, go ski, drink beer, chop vegetables in the restaurant, 4 days a week. And it was magical. It was like brain off and kind of just enjoy myself and I never experienced something like that in the Alps. It's such a cool place. It's very busy now, as everywhere is, but I'm glad I got that little snippet of kind of 5 years of just us, a whole bunch of Swedish, bunch of Swiss. That's it, and then maybe one Frenchman of a friend Pat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but loads of Swedes in Engelberg, right? Big Swedish sort of ski town, isn't it? A bit like Shamsud. Like, it just seems to be one of those places that the Swedes gravitate towards.
Yeah, yeah, Schwed. I think some of the Engelbergers ended up calling it Schwedeberg, like
Right.
a bit of a toilet. But lots of brilliant lifelong friends, and like one really great photographer. I mean, many, but Oscar Anander, an amazing photographer that's been based there
Yeah,
for
yeah.
absolutely
Well,
ages.
he's involved with the ski lodge, isn't he? That guy. Is that right?
Um, Not in a financial sense. I mean, all his stuff's in there, but he
Right.
he was part of that. That ski lodge has gone through a number of iterations of where it started. But yeah, he's brilliant, and he's been a pal for years. I mean, God, I ended up on a trip to Alaska with him, um, which was a total mistake. That was really interesting. Spent a month sat in a house waiting for the storm end. I mean, one day we got in a helicopter. We got up there, some massive slide kicked off, and they just came and picked us up and took us back, and that was it. So my AK experience involved looking out a window, getting one helicopter ride, and then snowmobiling up and down the highway, playing off the side banks. It's about as radical as it got.
That's the risk, is it? That's the risk of it.
Yeah,
But you alluded to, I'm going to call it like a self-destructive streak. I'm going to politely call it that. With so what? So can we talk about that a little bit? Because that obviously sounds slightly alarming. Well, like, so what was going on there then? Because you're basically saying on reflection you were putting yourself in hazardous positions on purpose. Like, so that that's quite a big, it's quite a big statement. You didn't say it that directly, but that was the implication. So what's all that about?
yeah, fair play. I think that only really came, with a degree of hindsight, but definitely a little bit of knowledge of what was going. This kind of need for speed, or the need to push yourself, or to find that kind of fresh, untracked glide, and to just see how far you could push it. I, I don't know where it came from, and it did start to change as I started to get to know older folk, and I would get into ski touring, and you'd have to slow the pace down, and get to know mountain guides. But I don't know, man. I think it again probably stems a lot from the dyslexia. Not to use it as an excuse or anything in that sense, but it was just when I get into something, I'm so hyper focused and I'm so into it that I just go and go and go and go and go and go. And up until recently, I wasn't really able to catch myself and have that perception of myself. And yeah, I- it kind of scares me actually to think, when I look back, it's like, what were you up to? But there was a lot of calculation in that. But with snow, you just never know, do you? There's that unknown element, and I guess that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, but y- you definitely kind of talk about it though as if there was almost like a deliberateness to it, rather than,
Yeah,
because I recognize the situations that you're talking about. Like, you know, you can be on a hill, you can be in your 20s, and you can be at the top of a run, and you can like talk yourself into doing the run because it looks like it's going to be fun. Like, and that's just sort of being a young fuckwit, really. Like, I'm not excusing it at all. Like, and like you, I completely cringe when I think back to some of those scenarios that we were in. But you're definitely talking about it in a slightly more deliberate way.
yeah. I think I was probably trying to prove something to myself. I have little bits of tape on my laptop in my van that say "I am enough." Now, the reason I've got that on that is that when I was that young little kid, and I was told I wasn't, I was told I was stupid. That kind of stuck with me, or massively has stuck with me all through my life. So I feel like this slightly self destructive nature could be kind of due to that, and I'm still trying to understand that at the moment. It's really quite new for me, but it's well pointed out, Matt. It's confusing.
As in, as in that you want to disprove the point or prove the point.
Oh wow, yeah. No, it's disprove actually. It's it is disprove. It's like, look what I can do, but not even to show off to other people. It's not about showing off to the outside world. It's to me. It's to the little kid, or like a nod to that scared little child, maybe.
Because one thing that I would say is obviously like you're talking about. I'm not even going to use the word negative because I don't think that is negative. I'm going to say that that almost sounds like a combination of what you're talking about and like youth, let's say. Um, but you've definitely channeled these challenges that you faced emotionally in a positive way. Again, like if I come back to this, I'm just going to use the phrase owning it for want of a better phrase, um, that's a really positive thing. That's a really like confidence a better word. It's a real confident thing, to be and quite a rare thing, I think. Like I don't know anyone else actually thinking about it who's defined the parameters of how they have a relationship with people by taking charge of in this case their dyslexia to the extent that you have. Do you know what I mean? Like, and again, if I use my wife as an example, like she definitely doesn't do that. Like she still lets society dictate the terms of that relationship, if that makes sense. Whereas you're really like not doing that. You're saying like, look, this is the deal, and if you want to interact with me, we're going to do it on these terms because this is what works best for me. And I think that's definitely the right approach. It's impressively confident, and it's also like really it's actually quite generous because it helps people understand it. Again, like I talked about with saying you have to do a lot of work for other people. You're doing that work for other people. You're joining those dots. You're saying like, here's the deal. Here's how it works. I've already thought about this more than you've thought about this. So we'll do it this way. Like that. There's a lot going on there, and it's very confident. Is my point. So that is interesting because you've had these. You've chosen to channel all this in a very confident way. That's the point I'm groping for. Let's say. So, in finest COD psychology tradition, where's that come from?
Um, no, man, really well crafted in that sense that there's a lot of it. Could people could probably look on to the way that I have and do live my life, and I don't see straight paths. Life is pretty much a big wobbly ocean that I'm just making my way through. But I guess I made a very concerted effort, and I am making a very concerted effort more and more as I start to understand myself and my dyslexia, about being proud about being dyslexic and showing that it's okay to be vocal about it, because it shouldn't be this thing. It shouldn't be this like hanger on. Like I think Ed touched on it in on his podcast with you, to go back to Ed Lee's. He talked about this thing where he was thinking, oh, is there this superpower? Is there this like higher sense of consciousness? And that can also come over as sounding arrogant. And I don't want to say I'm better than anyone, because I really don't believe in that. I really believe in just an equal thing. When you come to someone now, I try and always meet them as level as I can. And I think for me, I do this because I wanted this from someone when I was a young kid. I wanted to know older dyslexics. I wanted to see people cutting different paths to do all that. And it's becoming a bit in my world where I realize, maybe I want photography to be 50% of my life, or, to pick an arbitrary percentage. But what can I do also with that work and the time that I'm afforded out otherwise, to give something back to whoever it is, whoever's there? Like, I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep throwing it out there, and I'm no longer going to be anxious about it. If you're in, you're in. If you're not, you're not. Whatever. Don't judge me, because I'll try and smack you if you try and judge me. Like I'm sick of being judged like that, or having other people judged. I try and let that stuff wash over. And yeah, I think it's look. I've not actually talked about this before, and I'm gonna, which is along with dawndays that we'll touch on this experience, this thing that happened, and this. I lost a really close friend of mine, Jamie, about 10 years ago. She took her own life. And I was in New Zealand at the time when I was making this transition. And I will never forget that moment that I got that phone call. And there's a big history to this about me and the partner at the time, way back when I met Heather and Jamie. We helped her, we stopped her a couple of times, as did many people. But ultimately, she was always going to do what she was going to do. But it's taken me 10 years to really compartmentalize that thing. And I only really consciously realized why I'm beating this kind of drum or whatever I'm doing. I don't really know what I'm doing. But that soul thing is the loss of that person to me. And the thought that if one person can pick out a little nug out of my nonsense that helps them make a committed action for themselves to go and do something, then I will keep doing it and I will keep doing it and I will keep doing it. Because I just feel like, what else am I here for? Like, I'm not here to line the pockets of corporates or, work for X, Y, and Z brand. You know, I think more and more, like working for Patagonia, doing something for Finisterre, like these names that everyone puts up, like it's all kind of bullshit. It's the people, it's the interactions, that's the stuff I love. Sorry, I kind of went off on one there.
No, I totally agree with. I mean, like that's what the podcast's about. That is exactly what the podcast's about. I mean, I'm lucky enough to work with Patagonia, for example. Um, but what I should say is that there's a purity to what you just described. Like, which is at the heart of like all these things that we've dedicated our lives to, and everyone that's been on the podcast has dedicated their lives to. And I totally recognize what you're talking about. I think like that's the important shit. That's why I've done 180 episodes of this and give it away for free, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I think it's important, like this stuff, like, and it's just a vehicle, as Dawndays is, which we'll talk about next, I think, for you, and it's a vehicle for that, to try and communicate that.
Yeah. And
And I think that's really important personally.
yeah, I've been thinking about like, I've been doing this photography mentorship course in last year with this lady called Christina Force in New Zealand, and she is a force of nature, as her name says. But it's made me think about myself. It's made me think about the work. It's made me think about the motivations of what I'm doing, along with having gone and got a bit of act therapy back in January, February, March. When the pandemic hit, and then again working with a lady called Jana Johnston, which is kind of what would be coined by society as a bit more woo-woo side of things, and ultimately realizing that all these things are like coaching for your mind. I'm not trying to wash over the fact that I'm going to get counseling and then like cue American Voice, gonna go see my counselor, that kind of thing. It's like all of that shit needs to go, and realize that it's any of these things is just coaching. Like, how do I deal with these thoughts and feelings? How do I get the best out of myself? How do I give myself less shit? Because then I can turn up and be a better partner or a better son or whatever. It's like, if you don't give a shit about yourself, then it's going to be pretty hard to give a crap about anything else out there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is the perfect point to talk about Dawndays, but I do really need a piss, so
Yeah, so do I.
let's do that. So you're still getting up at 3:45 every day?
Yeah, that's a strange one. I don't quite know what's happened. This this Dawn Days experience of starting getting up at that time, but it kind of happened before that. I don't know why that's the way. I've tried many things from diet to meditation to all sorts of things, and I've currently just accepted that this is what it's like at the moment. And for whatever reason, the universe has decided that I get up at 3:45. I'm sure it won't be that for the rest of my life, and I just have to kind of work my life around it at the moment.
Is that would you term it insomnia, or are you just getting up early?
No, I just kind of getting up early. You know, I've tried pushing it later at night to see if I can then sleep, but it doesn't work. So, ideally I go to bed at 7:30, between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, I if I get need to get stuff done, I normally get up at 5, like, and I can get into a routine of that quite easily. I quite like it because you can actually get so much done. Like, if like, when I had to finish the book that we've just done, I was doing that, like, getting up at, like, well, setting my alarm for, like, 4:30, cup of tea, get up, be working at 5, and then can kinda get, like, this sort of concentration, heavy work done, hour and a half on that, and it's only, like, 6:30, you know? It's like, take dog for a walk, get back, and then, you've pretty much done a load of shit before everyone else is getting up, like, which is I don't know, it just works best for me. I'm not somebody that can, like, work late into the evening or whatever.
Yeah. I, I think,
So, I mean go on.
no, I think actually just touching what you're saying is ultimately what I've realized is that, when you understand this rhythm that you work in and that morning brain, there's something about that. If you are a morning person, you get up and you're just like, have your cup of tea, get in your zone, do your thing, and then get out and walk. And it's still, you've still got all this time. So I think that's what I've learned from the dawn days thing really is a committed action to yourself in the morning, whether it's work, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's just watching the sun, whether it's, I mean, literally anything. It doesn't matter, just because we've all gone out with our cameras and taken photos of the dawn, I think it can be anything.
So it was Dawn Days was a product of the fact that you started getting up early, and that was one of the things that you did. You got up and took photos of the well, maybe if you explain what it is, and then
Yeah.
for
So, well,
people that don't know what it is.
yeah, to give a little cross section about what Dawn Days was actually a phone call on the like third or fourth last day of April with a pal of mine, Nick Pumphrey, photographer down in Cornwall. And me and Nick had met through the kind of whole Patagonia connection, being on tour in Europe. And he was down in Hossegor, kind of living down there with his girlfriend and working from there. And we were just chatting and we had this really honest call. Every time I'd met Nick, we did have these honest, raw conversations. I would be quite blunt with him, I think, probably when I met him. And he just said, look, I'm going to swim out like every morning. Just take the camera at the blue hour, the hour before sunrise. Just see what happens. I'm missing getting out. My head's a bit of a mess. But doing all this reading of books and this and that. But I just need to do something every morning. And as soon as Nick said it on the end of this call, I was like, pal, I am there. Fast forward 2 days, two more massive hangovers, the liquid experience that was lockdown. And I just thought, I've got to do this. It wasn't because I felt shamed by him or anything. I just thought, I need this. And I jumped out, got my water housing together, into the wetsuit, down to the beach. It's 10 minutes walk down to there. Absolutely Baltic, beautiful sunrise. And I just started taking photos and little bits of video because I've got this amazing setup that I've traveled around the world with to take photos and film with. But I've never been to the beach in front of my house, which is 10 minutes walk. There ain't no surf in Portobello. Can't remember the band that's got a tune about that. But there's nothing, it's murky. There's uh, the waterworks, like, the shit salination for Edinburgh is like off to your left. There's a shit pumping pipe down to the right. There's God knows how many stormwater drains. So it's not exactly very pretty in that sense. But what I realized was when I got in the water, I was just there. I was in the zone. I was doing my thing that I'm happy with, being in the water with the camera. And just like you get down to this seal's eye view of the world and you watch in the light, and just every single morning I just see something else. I think something else. And the kind of the lady I was working with, this act therapist, Helen, was like, after a couple of weeks of chatting with her, and I had started this, hadn't chatted to her for a while, and she's laughing the first time I call her. What are you laughing at? She's like, you're doing exactly the principles of ACT. It's like, am I? She's like, yeah, you're making a committed action to yourself and something for the greater good, and you're doing it every morning. I was like, oh yeah, because I'm not a routine guy. I'm horrendous at that. I've never had one. I don't until now. I didn't know what they were, and I didn't know how beneficial they were. So this thing happened. Me and Nick would talk once a week or twice a week on the phone, and we'd be putting photos up, and I was putting videos up and working with musicians, locally and then globally, friends sending me tunes or vibing off the thing or how they're feeling. And I just spat out this kind of month of photos and videos. And I was really honest below in the text. And I would write these things as a kind of stream of consciousness. And sometimes I'd ping it to my dad to get it edited if it was time, or send it somewhere else, or I'd start using this Grammarly thing, which has been an amazing app to help me. And sometimes I just stick it up and be like, you know what, this is what I am. This is who I am. And it was a very kind of raw and open thing. And I just made this decision. I was like, sod it. If I'm going to be on these horrendously curated, algorithmically driven echo chambers, then I might as well just be me. Like, I accept it. I've always known what they are. Like, here's Mike. I'm a freckly, loud ball of noise.
But it's a powerful idea, and it's obviously been taken up and taken on a life of its own. It's over the last year now, isn't it?
Yeah, we're almost
So,
a year.
um, so can you explain how that's developed? Because there's a lot of people. I don't know how you would even phrase it, but that have really, the idea struck something with them, and there's a lot of people also kind of you know, doing this same act now, aren't there, at this time?
Yeah, I think that's actually a nice way to put it. I always find it hard and sort of never want to pigeon anything whole in life with, an act. It is just this act that you're doing. And so, yeah, it was me and Nick to start with, and then his pal Warby, who was really struggling at the time. He was inspired to get in the sea. He hadn't been in for like 20 years or something crazy. And then got himself in. And that was just us for the first while. But then as the year grew on and more people were kind of doing it every so often, and in January, when me and Nick kind of texted each other saying, what are you thinking? I'm thinking, we're going into another lockdown. We might as well. And at that point, it was crazy. We had people from like Shetland all the way down to Cornwall. Chris McLean, pal of ours, joined in this January as well. And there was people just doing it for all sorts of different reasons. And I think that's been what's really beautiful. And me and Nick actually caught up on Sunday. It's been ages. We're both horrendous at getting a hold of each other. And we kind of had a little bit of a reflection on that, about the positives and the negatives of something like this, because as with anything, you can become addicted to even the things that are good for us. So we touched on that sort of subject, and I think that's what's really interesting is as this kind of act develops through different places like Ireland and Wales, Cornwall, Shetland. There's some Aussies that have been doing it. My pal James Parry, he went and did a couple and just said it was such a breath of fresh air to go and do something different and not take a picture of a surfer. There's a lady down in near Melbourne that's kind of going out with a little crew of people, and it's just been really interesting, like connecting up with these people. Like, I'm taking times to not just text people but have voice messages or have calls with people and try and understand like what they're doing and why they're doing it, because it fascinates me. um but there's danger, the danger of the obsession. It's this classic, the human fascination with intoxication. Starts when we're a kid, we're spinning on a merry-go-round, you get off and you feel dizzy. I mean, even to this day, I do that with my goddaughter on the beach at the moment, and it's still awesome. But like, whether it's a device, whether it's a substance, whether it's love, God knows, we get so into these things that you kind of become so laser focused. And I think that's the beauty of the likes of these things as well, because you really, really, you just go all in. And now I step back and I look at myself and go, shit, am I banging a drum? I look down at my feet. Am I standing on a tatty box, a potato box? Am I ranting about something? And why is this person doing it? Why is that person doing it? And then again, step back. what's that person going through? Wonder what they've gone through in their life, you know? And as we scratch the surface of slowly connecting up with all these different people, I'm fascinated at like some of the stuff that people have gone through and what this has given them. But the ones that are then going, I can't do this every day. You know, like there's an amazing lady in Ireland, Hannah. She's been doing it every day in January. And then I realized she didn't have her wetsuit on. And she's like, oh, the thought of getting into a wet wetsuit every day just didn't like the idea of it. I'm like, what? But you're going to go in 4 degrees and you're cozy. And she's like, oh, yeah, there's a crew of us. It's grand, you know, like, but she explained her story and we're going to put her story out soon about what had gone on for her. She had lost someone. She was struggling. She went to see a counselor. And then the counselor had said the same thing, was like, look, this is great that you've got this committed action, but how can you integrate what you're learning into the rest of your life without having to go in every day? How can you take one breath or put your hand and, you know, touch a pebble in your pocket and just kind of find that little moment of calm and go, hey, everything's cool, you know? And then that's what this is about for me, is any of these actions or anything that I learn. I just want to know how I can interact in, I can, what's the word? How I can incorporate it into my whole day, into my whole life, so that I don't have to go and swim every day or yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because like you say, you're replacing one behavior with another, aren't you?
yeah.
Essentially, if you do that, like, I need a drink, or I'm not going to feel happy, or I need to go in the sea because I'm not going to feel happy. I think that's really a really interesting point as well, because this idea is obviously really powerful that you've had, but also like the whole sort of this whole movement recently of like equating getting in the sea with mental health is I find it really really fascinating, because it is a thing. It is definitely a thing, and it and you must have thought about this, knowing you and knowing like what you've unleashed upon the world with Dawndays, with you and Nick. Like, I look at it and I kind of think it, it's giving people part of what they perceive to be a missing part of their identity back. Obviously, that's what I look. That's kind of what I think, because it's very quickly become like a very tribal thing, and I don't mean that as in like the negative connotations of the word tribe. Obviously, like, but people feeling like they've found their tribe, and that's given them this sense of identity that perhaps they were in danger. They felt they were in danger of losing. I'm sure you know what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah,
Um, and that is very interesting, isn't it? Because, and it's also, if we're being honest, quite easy to take the piss out of as well, which is another. I'm not going to do that because I do it myself, but when things become that tribal that quickly, and there's even like a uniform that goes with this, as we know,
yeah.
um, that is interesting, like it, and I certainly find it quite fascinating. So why do you think this idea seems to have this power? And I'm obviously not just talking about Dawn Days. I'm talking about the whole wider movement.
Yeah, I think it's better to look at it with a much wider lens, as you are, Matt. And it absolutely fascinates me. You're completely right. And that's the thing that kind of, after January, and then I started that job, finished the job. And a lot of people are like, oh, why are you not going in? Do you not want to go in? Why do you not, what are you doing? I'm like, and it was, I didn't know how to vocalize what I was doing. And I'm still going down the beach. I still wake up and I still take a wander. I've got a camera with me. Um, but I'm actually chatting with more people. You know, there's so many people on our beach. There's hundreds that swim through the whole day. And even really, really early, there's a solid crew of like 10 or 15 in their little pods doing their thing. And I think, you know, it's magnified at the moment with the fact that everyone's been locked down and they find this tribe, like you put it, they find these brothers and sisters that understand them. But the more I think about it, you know, if I think about three ladies in specific, the Sunrise Social Club, as we called it, and I get to call myself part of the Sunrise Social Club with the girls as well, is that when they're walking down, there's a certain element, there's a certain energy we're actually all now picking up rubbish on our walk because it's like, never walk anywhere with an empty hand, and especially when you live on a filthy beach. And when those conversations are different from the ones once they've been in. Once they've been in, now you could say they've shocked themselves, or you could say that they've just had this thing of being really present and really calm, because you kind of need to, on that side, on the wild swimming or whatever box you want to put it in, you've got to be really concentrated. You've got to be really calm. The people that go in and flap and run don't last long. The people that go in with this calm, sensible demure, or whatever you want to call it, they're the ones that can last. And I think everyone's looking for a silver bullet. I looked for a silver bullet for the large part of my life. What one thing can I do that's going to sort me out? For me, I've realized there isn't a silver bullet. It's like a cocktail, but it's a non-alcoholic cocktail at the moment, of the right little bits that I hear from chatting with someone like you, or listening to your podcasts, or these photography podcasts I'm in, or the act therapy. I think it's about picking all these little bits that I've found that make sense and making my own little recipe. That's that's what I'm learning, and I think a lot of people do get to that point with this. There's people in these tribes or these crews, but then there's these individual characters, and they're the ones that really interest me. I'm loud, noisy, I'm an extrovert, I guess, as people would say. But the people that most interest me really in life are the introverts, the quiet one sitting on the couch, or on the bench, that I can see he's got the swimming gear, kind of waiting for all the fuss to finish off. And those are the people that I'm going down and walking on the beach with, and picking the rubbish. But picking the rubbish is also a point of conversation with people. It's a gentle way in. We don't talk about rubbish, but we maybe pick up rubbish together, and then we chat. And there's so much to be learnt about it, and I don't know where and what it is. I think it's positive that people are doing it. I think that's amazing. If you're doing this thing for yourself, that's great. I just wonder what happens when things start to spin faster and they can't do that every day. Have they, or how can people learn to take the message that they're learning from it into their everyday life? And when you're stressed, like I notice when I'm shooting and I'm in a commercial environment, like I can see my knuckles starting to go white, and I'm gripping the camera like it's going to be torn out of my hands, and it's like, now just taking one breath, kind of thinking of the ocean, or not even, I don't even have to think of it. It's like building little tools. Yeah.
That's interesting. So the work, as Americans would say, um, that's twice we've kind of made a bit of a disparaging reference to Americans
We
and
have. Sorry, America.
therapy, isn't it? That's probably quite bad. That's probably us, like, you know, underpinning those stereotypes that we've spent the whole conversation trying to debunk. Really,
But I think, and I
I'm going to
think,
try and stop doing that. I think actually
yeah, and that's judging, because we're judging, aren't we? And
that's judgmental, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah, but
which is probably not the point.
but
Although
then
also it's us both thinking that we're being funny as well.
that is true. We are thinking we're being a bit funny, but maybe what I'm trying to say by that, and when I say that American, I'm going to not justify this, but maybe explain that a little bit, is that that's that negative connotation of something like counseling, is that kind of,
It's quite a British thing, isn't it? It's
yeah,
almost like if we treat it as a joke, then we can get away with it. But if we, you wouldn't really find a British person like saying with a straight face, like, oh, I've got my therapist tomorrow. Like if any of your friends actually said that, like as if they were getting their hair cut or whatever, which is kind of how therapy is perceived in other parts of the world, you would definitely be like, wow, okay,
yeah,
and but why wouldn't you see a therapist? Like listen to the good it's done you, which was actually going to be my question. It just kind of struck me. But has that been a large part of it, the working out how to, for want of a better phrase, live your normal life while, fitting these constituent parts, the recipe as you described it, for mental well-being, like trying to fit them together in the everyday? Because like you say, it's not actually that, is it? I don't think it's that healthy if you come to rely on a dip in the sea every day to feel mentally balanced. And I certainly see that with friends online who are super into this, and when they can't go in the sea for whatever reason, then they you can see that they're like depressed by that, and that's not that healthy, is it really? You know, like you say, that it sounds like what you're trying to do is find the balance, you know, of making these things work for you.
Absolutely. And that, yeah. So the most important thing of me for me has been talking to people. So that started with some great friends, my friend Adam, my best pal Chris in Switzerland, daily calls, my pal Stu that lives here. You know, it was dipping in and chatting with all these guys and my mum and dad, you know, like having an open dialogue with my partner at the time, just being really, really honest, but then realizing, okay, they all know me. I'm attached to all of them. So there's gonna be a bias or how I'm acting to them. So, you know, hunting out who to go and speak to and finding act therapy, you know, through one of my pals that taught me to surf said, look, I think this would work with you. It's a kind of lighter way of looking at things. And then moving on to work with Jana. And those are the things that are the real helpers. Dawndays as such, this thing is just another element of that. It's just one of those little bits. It's not a silver bullet for me personally. And I never want to be addicted to something. Like I have an addictive personality. You know, like I'm aware of that. I've always been aware of it, but like painfully aware of it in the last couple of years. And so the things for me is learning like I've got this ridiculous thing of kind of like putting everything into terms of the ocean, drives some people mental. But for me, it's like the mind and then there's the harbor, you know, like you can let things in and out. There's one way in and out in a harbor. The tide goes in and out. You know, some harbors, no entry when the tide's out. I like to think of that like I've got the control. Like it could be stormy out there, but what's this calm sea inside me? What do I need to do to manage that? Who do I let in and out? Sometimes when the tide's out and I'm having a shit time, I just have to accept that and I have to sit in that moment and deal with it. And that could feel really painful and really scary, you know, back last May. But now those times are much smaller. And a lot of this anxiety and stress that I get comes from the dyslexia. And I only really started to understand that last week or accept that when I talked to this guy and he kind of explained my mind a bit more. And I thought, oh, I don't need to give myself so much hard time for that. Because we judge ourselves on everyone around us, our family, the echo chambers of the social media that we're in, the echo chambers of our friends. So I'm just trying to go, right, I'm going to stop judging other people and I'm going to stop judging myself because it's fun to poke, you know, like I love Billy Connolly. Like Billy Connolly is like a full hero. And I think there's an interesting thing with Billy where it's like, it's a double edge with him. He has this amazing self deprecating, if that's the right word, humor that just kind of brings us all down to a level. And I really like that. Maybe he's a bit harsh on himself and a bit harsh on others, but I kind of like think a bit more about like be a bit more like Billy. You know, be honest about yourself, make a little bit of a laugh out of it. But I think why he does that is he just kind of like normalizes stuff. He normalizes the shit that you're thinking about, but you never say. And I find myself being that person. I'm nowhere near Billy Connolly. I'm not trying to pretend I am, but like I like kind of dropping those things that you probably shouldn't say in public. You know, like why do I like doing? I don't know. I kind of like being the jester sometimes, like to inject energy and fun into a situation.
Well, my wife does that as well, and she puts it down. If we ever talk about that, she says it just like helps her stay calm in situations that she finds stressful as well. So it's like a kind of coping thing
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. It's
that's
quite an intentional thing.
that's
It's
so
quite interesting.
interesting.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah, maybe I should get her on. There's a lot
Yeah,
of our
I'd
friends that would fucking love that.
yeah,
Um,
I'd love to talk
with
to her
that,
actually sometime about it. It would be really
yeah, I
interesting,
think
man.
you guys have a lot to talk about for sure. Yeah, a lot of things that you've said today have really like, yeah, that's kind of why I've raised it a few times because obviously it's like my point of reference. But yeah, interesting. But on dawn days, do you feel? ownership of the idea? Do you feel proprietorial in any way? Because obviously you've created this. You and like you and Nick, your original idea has become this like thing, really, like popular thing. Do you feel like a responsibility to sort of steer it in a particular way, or like
Hmm.
look after it?
Yeah, I think ownership, no. You know, so many people have gone out and shot at dawn. You know that there's nothing unique in that sense. So ownership, no. It was Nick's idea to go out, and then I jumped on, and without a doubt, we're very different people. There's a yin and yang element to us. We both think very deeply, but we have different paces, and I do feel some sense of, like, I call it shepherding, I guess, like in a positive sense. I never want to control anything. There's no rules to it, because creativity should never have rules attached to it. In fact, I just think rules in general in life, I don't really get them. I've never stuck by them. But yeah, I feel it, the reason I feel I want to shepherd it is because I want to tell some of the stories that I've heard. That again, like the film that I put out, which was a very honest piece with my friend John, that I know that that resonated with a bunch of people who have made a committed action to go and get some help. And my goal for that was just one person, really. But we know that it's had more of an effect than that. So, yeah. But then what part of that is my ego? Wanting to control it? I don't want to control it. What do I want to do with it? I don't know. I'm very much in this question. And me and Nick talked about this on Sunday, actually, after my chat with you. And then I'd had a couple long calls with Owen, with your pal. And we kind of touched on some of these subjects, how the ego can get involved. And like Nick was saying, oh, like, I know I don't have to go out every day, but we're still in lockdown. And I said I would do it with his friend James Hardy. And I think, was it Mikey Leigh? He said the other day to him, just went, you don't have to go out every day. And he's like, I know. But at the moment, it's still working for him and it's still serving this purpose. Um, but what I thought was great is that, he's had this awareness, as I think a lot of people during it, if you do it long enough, you have this awareness and go, what am I doing?
Well, it's a big commitment, like a year in to still be, because you're allowed to change and to sort of be like, well, that's not really, I don't need to do that as much anymore. That's kind of fine. It's interesting, isn't it? But I think from speaking to you, you've sort of got the balance of that. When we chatted last week, you were saying you're actually quite comfortable with the fact that you weren't going out every day, and you were trying to be quite careful again not to become a slave to the idea, to sort of let it define you, and just be like, well, if I get up and do it, I do it, and if I don't, I don't.
Yeah. And I think, again, here he goes. He's going to talk about dyslexia again. But there's this pivot point. I was on a call with this guy, Billy Plummer, and Christina, who I do this mentorship with. And it was about how to shine, as Christina put it. And my project got picked up because we're all doing our personal projects as photographers. So there's 16 photographers from around the world. And they said, like, what's going on here? And then someone said, Billy said, but you've stopped at the moment, haven't you? And he's like, are you at that pivot point? And I realized, yeah, like, this is something that will be a part of me for the rest of my life. Like a new realization about what I love about the ocean. But I kind of think of it as a bit of an octopus at the moment. There's this central kind of core idea and experience that I went through as dawndays, but there's so many tentacles and ways to go off from it, personally, creatively, emotionally, everything. All of the probable personal projects that I will carry on with will be slight deviations from that. But the things I've learned from doing this thing, like, just, yeah, yeah, it's so fascinating. Like, it's maybe why I can't sleep is I'm just so fascinated by the whole thing. Like, I'm writing constant lists, doing mind maps, sending memo after memo to my poor assistant Millie with just like ramblings, but I'm excited because I feel like personally, for me, I've unlocked a whole bunch of tension and stress and anxiety, and I've been kind of building up. I'm like just sort of a bit frantic. It's still, it's like, oh, slow down. So it's been brilliant.
So what is next? Great segue.
Good segue. Um, I'm working on a Dawndays book thought, which is why I was kind of chatting, bending your ear and Owen Tozer's ear there. And that's proving to be really interesting. So we're just chatting to everyone that got involved, collecting some photos, asking a certain number of questions, and then I'm going to kind of give people a call and have a chat and just see what comes from a chat and try and understand things and ultimately create a coffee table book with a designer pal of mine, Barry, over in Canada, reached out and said, "Hey, dyslexic boy, I get you. I guess you're quite scared of doing a book." I was like, "Oh my god, the thought of it. I mean, how do you even start?" And he went, "To know, you ask your talented graphic design pal to help you." And so Barry's helping me, Millie, and a friend Adam in Norway. So we're kind of working on that, and I think I'm just going to take the gas off that a bit and let that develop. Um, that's one of the main things really that I'm focusing on work wise. It's still pretty patchy. I'm doing things, everything from like shooting coffee roastery coffee boxes to social media content from them. There's a bit more work on the film to happen. And I've just got our laser focus for a bunch of personal projects to kind of document some of the people that I've met within my community. So I've spent 21 years on the road. I've lived in this area for 10 years and I hardly knew anyone. And I didn't know what I had on my doorstep, which is tons of photographers, illustrators, animators, painters, musicians. And so I'm kind of just really enjoying dipping into my community and realizing I live in a big city, but this little nugget of Portobello with the water, there's some pretty interesting individuals that I want to get to know and take photographs of. And the most challenging one currently is the bin men. They're my new best pals. I don't think they think I'm their best pal, but we have this crew of bin men that obviously go up and down and clear the streets and the beach. And obviously, as everything's releasing from lockdown, everyone's feeling, super tense. People are coming down and having fires on the beach. Some people are super respectful and some people aren't. And, I know me just picking up rubbish is just a small blip, but it's kind of this process of me again trying to understand what's going on in people's minds. For me, it's like, why don't you care? And so chatting with these guys that have been doing it for 25 years, I'm kind of slowly getting portraits of them, but it's like getting blood out of a stone with this lot. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Nice. That sounds like a great project. I've got a friend who does that kind of reportage. Who does a lot of stuff like with working class communities in the southeast and like refugee communities, and yeah, I mean it's you can really dedicate yourself to something like that and try and paint an honest picture, can't you? Which is half the battle, really, when you try to do these things.
Yeah, I've been listening to quite a lot of podcasts regarding that, that lens that we put on things, because we can take something in a certain way and then we can grade it. You can smash up the clarity slider and it looks really grungy and epic or whatever. I hate to use that word, but so how do you honestly tell a story? I think I've quite blindly gone through my life. Well, this life of photography and film, quite blindly just taking photos, not really thinking about it, and now realizing that actually there's something about taking that time to think and talk with people and work through ideas and start to really ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is this for loads of likes on social media? Is it for me to feel better about myself? Or do I genuinely, honestly want to tell the stories of the guy that's driven a tractor for 25 years picking up trash on the beach? And he's called Cogs or Gogs. And I was like, so where are my motivations? And instead of just usually just snap, 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 snap. So yeah, I'm quite excited to have a bit more of a conscious eye on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that's a real theme, like this sort of introspective look at what you're doing and try to work it out, which is definitely one of the things I've taken from the conversation. Yeah, it's fascinating. So with Dawn Days, just to wrap it then, like if people listen to this, obviously one of the great things about Dawn Days is the community, is the sense of inclusiveness that people obviously feel. And like you say, it's quite a global thing now, isn't it? So if people want to take part, find out more, where should they go? How should they do that?
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, you can go to dawndays.com, so dawndays.com, which I really need to work on that website, but you'll see my hairy face and Nick's hairy face and a few other people and links to the music of the musicians that have worked with me on stuff. And just connect up with me. Give me a shout, if you want a blether. um, that's it. It's a simple thing. Whether you're painting, whether you're filming, whether you're recording sound, whether you're writing poetry, writing dribble, whatever it is, there's no rules to it. So yeah, just go check it out on there. Hopefully, I'll make more of an effort of making that make a bit more sense. And then there's a film called The Ripple Effect, which is on currently on my Instagram, or you can find it through the Dawn Days website. And if you want that film and you'd like to put that out on your channel, you're more than welcome. We're kind of letting people do it, and use it if they want, because if it touches one person, then that's great. So, we own this thing, but we don't really own it. So it's like, who cares how many likes and clicks and views it gets? Just let's just get it out there.